Cooper Flagg in a wheelchair? Oh boy, are the Blue Devils in trouble?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Friday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your host. This is the man, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listener watch to kick off your championship week Friday the right way. You can listen to every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. We want to give a special shout out to the everydayers here with us, and of course, all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. Now's the time to get in there because, boy, is it cooking. Andy, this episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Coming up on the show today, Andy, oh my, I think you texted me earlier today that we could probably go about 4 hours here and still not get it all in, because that's how bonkers Thursday was and that's how crazy Friday is going to be. So we had a mixed team results yesterday. We're going to look ahead to a very chalky non-bid thievery Friday, Andrew. In fact, Andrew, I don't even know what that is, Andy, but we've already got one game underway today. VCU up early on the Bonnies, the fighting Adrian Woj-bombs. But first, Andy, we got to get to a Thursday filled with some crazy endings and, most importantly, some injuries. Unfortunately, we never want to see this. So, Andy, we got to start with the biggest news that anyone wanted to talk about on Thursday, and that was the fact that not only did Duke lose Malik Brown, their best interior defender, in the first half, but unfortunately, Cooper Flagg comes down from a rebound, rolls his left ankle pretty bad. Thankfully, x-rays are negative, no breaks or anything, but this man was wheeled out in a wheelchair. Yeah. Andy, John Shire's post-game comments made it seem almost certain that Cooper Flagg would not take the floor again in the ACC tournament. Is there any world of possibility in which you would put the potential National Player of the Year back on the floor ahead of the NCAA tournament?
Almost no. Almost like very, 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 very little. He would have to make a recovery that medically seems borderline impossible based on what we know. I'm not a doctor. I'm also not examining Cooper Flagg's ankle, but from what we saw, from what Sean Shire said after the game, like, it sounds like he's going to recover okay, but there's no reason to risk it. First of all, you might be able to beat North Carolina and win the ACC tournament without Cooper Flagg. Now, doing it without Cooper Flagg and Malik Brown is a tough ask. You're losing a significant amount defensively with Malik Brown out. Obviously, you're losing a lot of everything with Cooper Flagg out, just because of how talented he is and what he brings on both sides of the basketball. But I think you have to be willing to take the risk. The risk of Cooper Flagg playing, re-aggravating the injury, missing the NCAA tournament. That's catastrophic for you, for Duke. Whereas losing to North Carolina today without Cooper Flagg, it's not catastrophic.
No.
And I realize telling Duke fans that losing to North Carolina is not a big deal is probably not something that they're going to love, but you have to understand the bigger picture here.
That's right. That's right.
You're going to still be a 1 seed if you lose to North Carolina in this game. You're maybe not going to be the number 1 overall seed. You might be like the third 1 seed, depending what happens with Houston and some of those other teams. But you're going to be a 1 seed if you lose this game to North Carolina. Like, that is, I would be absolutely stunned if they move Duke to the 2 line because of this. There's 4 or 5 SEC teams competing for those spots, but they can't all win. They can't all win all their games. So somebody's going to lose. I think Duke's going to still get that spot. So to me, I don't see this being a Kenyon Martin Cincinnati situation where it didn't work out for them and they dropped to a 2 seed with his injury. I don't think that happens. I think that the expectation is that with some rest, Flagg will be able to play in the NCAA tournament. That's what we know as of Friday morning as we're recording this live. We don't have any major updates, but I would be surprised to see Cooper Flagg before the NCAA tournament because I just don't think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Coach Shire showed us his cards in a wise way, right? Both for his team and for his star player. Like that's what matters. Andy, let me pretend that you're a member of the NCAA tournament selection committee. What would you need to see from Duke tonight against North Carolina and maybe tomorrow against either Clemson or Louisville to show that Duke is going to be okay if they don't have Malik Brown and or Cooper Flagg as we get into the tournament next week, right? Like how would you process that?
Yeah, I think what I'd be looking at is how the other players kind of step up in those absences. Mason Gillis being a big one, obviously a player who's been in the national championship game, has played a valuable role, and hasn't been a significant contributor for Duke in terms of like just minutes and production, but has been very valuable to them when he has played. I think he's going to step into a bigger role. We've seen that already. Malik Brown, this isn't his first foray into injuries this season. But obviously Flagg is the big absence. And if they're playing without him against North Carolina, again, it's the score and all that matters to some extent. But really, I want to see how does Malawak look taking on a bigger role potentially defensively without Brown and potentially offensively as well. What about Con Knipple, who went crazy against Georgia Tech with injury? He had 28 in that game. And again, Georgia Tech's not a great team. North Carolina's a better team. If Con goes out and drops 30 against North Carolina, like I think you feel pretty darn good about Duke's chances going forward, and he could absolutely do that. And then it's even like further down the depth chart a little bit. Does Isaiah Evans step up? How does some of those other guys coming off the bench step up? And then guys
Mason Gillis,
and Sion James and guys like that who already have big roles, but they're going to have to take on a bigger load offensively to kind of carry this team without Cooper, assuming he misses these next couple of games. Again, as a committee, if I was a committee member, there's very little that could happen that would really alarm me about Duke. Like, I think they could lose to North Carolina and it wouldn't alarm me. I mean, if they got blown out, maybe I would raise a few eyebrows at that. But I don't think that's particularly likely. I think there's a very good chance Carolina can win this game, but I don't think they're going to blow them out. But I think that short of that, I don't think there's much that would sway me too dramatically. Obviously, barring an announcement that Flagg's going to miss the entire tournament or something like that, which doesn't seem likely at this point.
And Duke's not going to do that. If behind the scenes they're not going to feed the committee that information, right?
Absolutely.
Like there's no way that's going to happen. Yeah, and Andy, specifically, I'm watching the defense for Duke, and here's why. I'm on Sports Reference right now. When you go to the per 100 possessions details, which gives us our offensive rating, our defensive rating, Cooper Flagg and Malik Brown rate as the two best Duke Blue Devils in terms of defensive rating, in terms of the guys that are actually in the rotation.
Right.
And so how does everyone else step up on the defensive side of the floor for this team that is elite, but so much of that is because of those two dudes that probably won't be playing tonight. Andy, just a couple other injuries. Well, I'm just going to mention them and we'll keep on flying by. Malik Brown is not the only one that re-injures his shoulder on Thursday. Unfortunately for Kentucky, they lose Lamont Butler again, and we'll see about his shoulder, because the Kentucky staff made sure to say to Molly McGrath, because she communicated this on the broadcast last night, that they were only ruling him out for yesterday's game. And so we'll have to wait on updates there. And keep in mind, they were already without Jackson Robinson for Iowa State. Neither Kashawn Gilbert nor Taman Lipsey played against BYU yesterday. Obviously, BYU won that game, so we're not going to know about Iowa State and these two guys until Thursday or Friday, whenever they start play. Andy, we just mentioned Lamont Butler. We had a bunch of crazy endings yesterday. Let's just hit a couple of these really quick. Kentucky, Oklahoma was one of the last games of the night. And boy, I'd tell you, my heart was racing. I couldn't go to bed. This thing was so crazy, Andy. Let me just set up quickly what happened at the end. Kentucky up 11 with a minute 45 to go, up 10 with a minute 20 to go. Due to some very questionable calls, there was a continuation and one that Oklahoma got. There was no flagrant one called. Andrew Carr was like drugged to the floor by his shoulders. Otega Owe stripped of the ball. I thought he was fouled. No call there. Anyway, all that said, Oklahoma takes a lead with 5 seconds to go, and then Otega Owe does it again to his former team. Andy, I mean, it's one of those, you can't write this. You can't make this up. What do you take away from Kentucky's win over Oklahoma?
I mean, seriously, your dream, I don't know. I have no idea if Otega Owe had a bad experience at Oklahoma, if he's got animosity. I don't know. But I cannot imagine dreaming up a scenario where you transfer away to a different school and your former school joins the conference of the new school that you're going to play at, and then you hit 2 game winners against them in the regular season. Like that literally, if you submitted that to Hollywood, they would be like, "No, that's too unrealistic. Like it's not even believable that could happen." Here's the situation. Shout out Otega Owe, and our friend Locked On Kentucky host Lance Daw. He posted something on Instagram. I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically along the lines of, "All right, Mark Pope, we're going to give you the head job at Kentucky. You're going to have to rebuild an entire roster. You're going to be in the most difficult conference in the history of college basketball, and your 3-point guards are going to be injured. Good luck. Yeah. And like, this team is here. They are like they've survived despite all of that. Kirk Reese has been out since December. Lamont Butler has been in and out. Jackson Robinson's down. Like, for this team to still be, and I mean, I think we got to give Oklahoma their flowers too. An incredible fight for this team, and likely enough to keep them in the field. But shout out Kentucky for battling through tremendous amounts of adversity this season to still be in the position that they're in. You know, we're talking about how everything's kind of chalk for the most part, and it's like Kentucky had to battle really hard to be in this position. And we'll talk, I know we're going to talk Louisville, Stanford in a second. Like, Stanford gave everything that they possibly had to Louisville too. Like, it was a chalky results for the most part, but there was some incredibly tight, exciting basketball games to get us here.
Yeah, Andy, there was a world in which the other side of the ACC bracket, we just mentioned Duke and North Carolina, where both Louisville and Clemson almost lost last night. Crazy stuff. Let me mention 3 other quick, crazy games and see if you just what was maybe the bonkers-isest. I know that's not a word, but you're with me. Louisville beats Stanford 75-73. Andy, this game was destined for overtime. Stanford gets a rebound, and poor Chisham Akpara loses the ball. It kind of looked like he just threw it away straight to Chucky Hepburn, but on replay, I think it was just kind of tipped or bounced or whatever. And Chucky Hepburn, buzzer beater, just 5, 7, 10 feet away in the lane there. Really nice. Texas beats Texas A&M in double OT to really help their bubble chances. 94-89. They were aided, I might add, Andy, at the end of the first overtime by a missed travel just before a 3 that cut the lead to 1. Crazy stuff there. And then Creighton survives DePaul. DePaul had been up, I think 17 was the most in this game. They stormed back. DePaul had literally never made whatever, are we in the semifinals of the Big East, and they were destined to do so, and they don't. But just crazy stuff there, Andy. Out of those 3, and I know we had multiple other crazy tight endings, but these 3, along with the UK-OU game, really stuck out. Out of these, what stuck out to you?
I mean, just so devastated for DePaul. 17-point lead, to blow that lead and then still come back and force overtime in this game. After blowing a big lead, so many teams just completely wilt and crumble. And this team managed to pull themselves together. Layden Blocker hits a big shot, forces overtime. At that point, I thought Creighton's dead in the water. You can't come back from a 17-point deficit and then let the other team come back and send you to OT. Like, you cannot do that. And yet Creighton still survives. Obviously, they're the more talented team. They were the better team than DePaul. Everybody would tell you that. And for DePaul to have fought so hard to nearly win this basketball game, it was so fun. I shout out to Chris Holtman. There's a good article. I think it was Matt Norlander at CBS who wrote it, talking about, like, he was, he people told him, don't take this job. Like, don't take the DePaul job. It's the worst job in power conferences. And he took the job, and they won more games in the Big East. They won 4 games. They did better in conference play. Like, he's got this program going in the right direction, and it would be really, really cool to see him turn this program around. I doubt DePaul is going to be competing for Big East titles anytime soon, but to see them out of the cellar in this conference is a fun story. And to see a game like this, where they nearly take down a powerhouse in that conference, that's a lot of fun. Isaac, we got some bubble action to talk about. Lots and lots and lots of bubble action to talk about. Boise State, they got a huge win over San Diego State, who's going to be a lot sweatier on Selection Sunday. Now we're going to talk about that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, we're all about the stats here at Locked On, because numbers, they don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com.
This episode is also brought to you by our good old friends at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra dollars to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's going to be cutting down the nets on FanDuel. When you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always exciting action to get in on. Andy, a couple close lines today. One of our favorite Big Ten games in a very chalky Big Ten lineup today. Maryland, 1.5 point favorites over Illinois. The exact same line in the non-Duke Carolina game of the ACC tournament. Clemson, 1.5 point favorites over Louisville. If you want to get in on that action or anything else, go check it all out at FanDuel.com and get in on all the college hoops action all tournament long. Andy, it's time to get a little bit bubbly. Not champagne, not kid bubbles, but just NCAA tournament bubbles. And Andy, we're really coming down to it, right? Like just the last couple days of competition here before the selection committee is going to let us know how this all plays out. And in the meantime, we just keep guessing. I'll just give us a couple of the latest updates from a couple of the bracket places. I'll give us Lunardi from ESPN, Jerry Palm from CBS, and then the bracket matrix, which is an aggregate of like over 100 different bracketologists. I'm just going to do right at the cut line, Andy. We're not going to do last four buys. We're not going to do next four out, just last four in and first four out. For Lunardi, overnight, he did last four in of San Diego State, despite their loss to Boise, North Carolina, then Xavier and Texas, who jumps into the field, but not as far as maybe we thought, despite their back-to-back quad one wins. First four out. Those Hoosiers fall back beneath the cut line. Yeesh. Then Ohio State. Both of those Big Ten teams are now idle after losing in the Big Ten tournament. Then Boise State and Colorado State, two Mountain West schools to round that out. Moving quickly to Jerry Palm, who's got things a little bit different here, Andy. Last four in. The Hoosiers are on the good side of it here, as is Boise State, San Diego State, and Xavier. First four out. North Carolina, Dayton? Question mark? I don't agree with that. Colorado State and the Longhorns, who are pretty far out there, Andy. That's interesting. And then bracket matrix, the aggregate, last four in: San Diego State, Indiana, Xavier, North Carolina. First four out: Ohio State, Texas, Boise State, and UC Irvine. Andy, pop quiz. What's that mascot?
The Anteaters.
Yes, sir.
West Coast guy. I know that one.
I know. Well, look, I just got to make sure you're on your game here Friday, because our brains are mush already heading into March Madness. And so we just got to make sure you're staying sharp. Andy, what do you make of that bracketology? Agreements, disagreements, question marks, whatever?
Yeah, some surprises for sure. I'm a little surprised to see Dayton ahead of Texas. I just don't really get that argument on Palm's bracketology. I know he's got them both out, but like Texas has 7 quad one wins, Dayton has 3. Dayton has 5 quad 2 losses. Like I don't even hate Dayton being like borderline bubble, but they shouldn't. I don't get Texas still being as low as they are. Just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Wins over Texas A&M, like wins in the SEC tournament, like they're in a position where they should be more firmly in the field, in my mind. To see like Xavier's still kind of on that cut line is a little interesting to me too. 2-9 in quad one wins. Like they just haven't performed all that well in that space. I like this Xavier team. I think I would be happy to see Xavier in the tournament, because I like watching this team. Ryan Conwell going absolutely insane against Marquette. We had 38 points, 7 of 11 from 3. Like that performance alone is enough for me to be like, yeah, find a way to get this team in, because I want to see that dude in the NCAA tournament, especially since he was robbed last year at Indiana State. Like get this dude into the big dance. But Xavier's, like seeing them over some of the teams that they're ahead of in Lenardi's and even in the bracket matrix. I'm like, Xavier, Texas head to head, I think I'd probably go Texas's resume. So that's a little bit interesting to me. But you know, all of these teams are kind of right around the same spots. So it'll be interesting to see kind of the teams that still have opportunities to boost their resume. Obviously, Texas being among them, North Carolina being among them, Boise State being among them. It's going to be really interesting to see even Colorado State, who's kind of in that mix. A team that, you know, you look at the standings in the Mountain West, Colorado State finished second. Team that finished first, New Mexico, they're considered in. Utah State finished third, they're considered in. Boise State and San Diego State finished 4th and 5th. They're considered on the bubble, and both of them, for the most part, were ahead of Colorado State in the bubble, and yet Colorado State finished second. So it's kind of odd to me that they were kind of, and I get it, the non-conference schedules were different, and Colorado State struggled early in the year, but I was like, you know, if you finish higher than 3 other teams in your conference who are considered more safely in the field than you, like, that'd be a little frustrating for the Rams fans. So I'll be interested to see if they can make some noise in their games and potentially more solidify themselves in the field. But, we've been talking a lot about the bubble being weak, and it is, but there's a lot of good teams here. It's just a lot of good teams that underperformed, where their resumes aren't really up to the par that you'd like to see them at. But I'm interested to see, Indiana put up a good fight against Oregon, but ultimately fell. How much does that ultimately hurt them? I think that's a team that I feel like is really right on that cut line. Like, I could see that going either way. So it's going to be interesting to see how the teams that are still playing, ultimately what they do to help themselves. And of course, the bid thievery situation, which right now feels like, if you're a bubble team, I think you're pretty happy with the fact that there's no power conference teams that could realistically be bid thieves, except maybe Texas and Carolina, if you count them. But there's not. The likelihood is that at most we get maybe one bid thief if somebody takes down Memphis, and that's about it. Like, so that's a plus if you are a team on the bubble right now.
So, Andy, I love what you said there about, and I guess truly, excuse me, I'm trying to clear my throat. This is a thing that happens every year, right?
Yeah.
The teams that wind up around the bubble are teams that maybe had bad resume issues earlier in the year and have found themselves now.
Yeah.
I feel like this is more and more true in the transfer portal era, where teams just often take a long time to figure themselves out. In fact, this is probably an off-season conversation we're going to have, but we've seen some people advocate for a longer regular season to make up for that. So that teams have longer to prove themselves and build a more legitimate resume if they take a while to find themselves. I think initially gut reaction is I'm in favor of that. But I say that to say multiple of these teams pass the eye test. Like, as I watch Boise State, as I watch Texas battling A&M, as I watch what North Carolina has done in their last 9 games, as I watch Colorado State's crazy run, as I watch what Indiana has looked like since the Mike Woodson firing stuff, right? Like, these all feel to the eye test like tournament teams to me. So ultimately, Andy, it's going to come down to what is the committee going to decide with them. To that point, Andy, our big winners yesterday, Boise State knocking off San Diego State, Texas getting that 2 OT win over A&M, which is kind of hilarious in their first year back in the SEC. North Carolina getting a win over Wake Forest, down big early, and then Colorado State just continuing to win and continuing to show out. Andy, any of those that you thought were like the biggest winner out of that foursome?
Yeah, I think it's probably Texas. And to your point, I think the point you made previously about the transfer portal, like, I was thinking about some of these rosters, and like, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Texas has a very, very new roster with, they add Tremont Mark and Jordan Pope. Of course, they add Trey Johnson in and Kaluma, like 4 new starters for that team. Xavier had some significant overhaul on their roster. North Carolina, not as much. They kept some key pieces, but they had the 2 new freshmen they had to acclimate into the system. Indiana and Ohio State. Yeah. Right. Indiana and Ohio State had pretty significant roster overhauls as well. So I do think that was absolutely a factor. But Texas is a team that, they, again, being in the SEC gave you the opportunities to pick up those quad 1 wins. Like, they had a better chance. Like, North Carolina, they've won I don't know how many games in a row, and like, it hasn't helped their resume as much because they're not beating very many good teams. They have obviously a big opportunity
because ACC. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. They have a big opportunity for Carolina to do that. But for Texas, like, every game they played was an opportunity to pick up a big win for the most part, and they got a few good ones. And so they're in a really good spot right now. I'm surprised that some of the bracketologists haven't been as aggressive in moving them up as I think I would be. I mean, they have 4 quad 2 losses. I get that. That's not great, but they don't have any quad 3 losses. They don't have any quad 4 losses. Most of these other teams that are on the bubble have at least 1 in those categories. 4 losses in the quad 2 is not that big of a deal. And 7 and 10 in quad 1 that's pretty good. Like, I don't, like, if they were like 2 and 14 or whatever, like, that's different, but 7 and 10 in quad 1 games is a pretty good record. Like, that is like 7 quad 1 wins is more than a lot of teams near the very top. Like, Gonzaga's got 4, Maryland's got 7, St. John's has 5, Purdue has 7, Wisconsin has 6. Like, Texas has more quad 1 wins than a bunch of really good teams. So to me, they should be in. They got a great W on Thursday. So I think they're the biggest winner. Shout out North Carolina for beating a bubble team. Shout out Boise State for beating a bubble team. It always helps when you do that, and you not only get yourself a W, but you kind of eliminate a potential threat. I think for Carolina, they fully eliminated Wake Forest. San Diego State still very much in this conversation, but Boise State did themselves a lot of favors with that W on Thursday.
Yeah, and to your point, speaking of Boise State, they've got 2 quad 2 losses. That's fine. but they've got a quad 3 and a quad 4, Andy, and that's going to be tough. In terms of the losers, I'll just mention them and then we'll keep moving. Obviously, you already mentioned Indiana going down. Xavier, tough loss for them against Marquette. They've been playing so well. You mentioned Conwell's game. Good grief, that was crazy, in San Diego State. And so we'll keep our eyes on where all three of those teams fall. Andy, I do not know what the selection committee is going to do with those schools. I'm really intrigued by that. Baylor, Oklahoma, and Arkansas were all bubble losers, but Andy, I feel like they're good and they're in. On the other side of it, SMU, Wake Forest, and Villanova, also bubble losers, and I think they were already on the outs looking in, and I think they're even more on the outs looking in now, meaning that if North Carolina doesn't get in, the ACC will have its fewest NCAA tournament participants since the year 2000, when those Terps were in there, and they ain't even in the ACC any longer, and it's going to be crazy, and that all sets us up for going to Friday.
And it's going to be so chalky. It's so funny how there were so many great games, so many fantastic finishes, everything we've talked about already. And yet, when looking at the matchups today on Friday and going into the weekend in the power conferences, for the most part, it's pretty chalky. So we're going to talk about that, what that means for those bubble contenders, all that and more coming up in just a second. But first, folks, ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I, we always want to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to finances, and thankfully with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks. We want to continue to talk about Friday's games. Already some of them underway. Oregon, Michigan State just getting underway. We talked about St. Bonaventure and VCU late in the first half right now as we're recording live on Friday morning. But one of the things we noted as we were kind of putting our notes together and looking at all the conference matchups in the power conferences is that for the most part, it's really, really chalk. And we also don't look like we're going to get a lot of bid thieves. I think the average per year is like 2 to 3 bid thieves every single year. And that's obviously very bad news for bubble teams who are kind of right. You know, the teams that are on the next 4 out or last 4 in oftentimes find themselves, you know, desperately watching to hope that Duquesne doesn't do what Duquesne did last year, or NC State doesn't do what they did last year and steal that potential bid. And right now we just, in the power conferences, we don't have any. The only teams in the power conferences that are still playing that may not make the tournament are North Carolina and Texas, and they're already on the bubble. So if they make it, if they win their conference tournaments, it's not really stealing a bid. I don't see it in most of the other conferences. Maybe the American, that's the most likely spot if somebody upsets Memphis in the AAC. People have talked about there being a 2-bid Big West, which I would love. UC San Diego, UC Irvine, those teams are awesome. They're both playing tonight. I don't think we're going to get a 2-bid Big West, so I don't think there's going to be a bid thief there. A10, Dayton's kind of floated around the bubble, but I don't think that I don't think we're going to see a bid thief there either. So I think if you're a bubble team, you're feeling pretty good because the bracket is shaken out in a way, or the conference tournaments are shaken out in a way where it doesn't feel like we're going to see any of these teams kind of get shafted by somebody stealing a bid. Is that kind of your read outside of maybe somebody doing some damage in the American? You seen anything else, Isaac?
No, not at all. And I love how you said all that. And what's funny about the American, Andy, I was just thinking about this. That's one of the final championship games to be played before the selection show comes on, right? Like Big Ten, is it Big Ten or SEC that's dead last? I can't ever remember the order. But anyway, sure. Yeah. American is right there. And so the committee will certainly have a contingency ready for that. Because they're not going to have time to adjust it all. And so that's going to be a wild thing to keep our eyes on, is that we won't know if we get an AAC bid thief until the moment, you know, just in the hour or two leading up to the selection show. So that's really interesting with it, Andy. And I love what you said about North Carolina and Texas, for example, because yeah, it's less bid thief, and we would almost call it like bubble certainty or something. Like it's like we need a new phrase for that, because you're right. It's not a bid thief in the truest sense of what we think of like you said, NC State. And so that's really interesting. All that said, Andy, then let's look ahead to this very chalky Friday, and something that you and I were thinking on earlier that I just want to say and move past right now, and we might talk about it in the lead up to the tournament next week, is the chalkiness of the Power 5 conference tournaments an indicator of something we can look ahead to for the actual NCAA tournament, or will that change? So I just want to put that out there into the ether, and then we'll think about it. Andy, I'm just going to read these in alphabetical order by conference. We got the ACC semis tonight, North Carolina and Duke. We've already talked about it. It'll be at 7 on ESPN, followed by Clemson and Louisville. That'll be 9:30 or half an hour after that one goes, also on ESPN. Big 12 semis coming from Kansas City. This one is straight up chalk. Number 1, Houston against number 4, BYU, who was a bubble team, Andy, and they have done their work. That's another one of those teams like you were talking about that's wildly brand new, but they've just done it at a higher level than some of these others. Same time, but on ESPN2, 7 o'clock. And then we get Texas Tech against Arizona, the 2 and 3 seeds, at 9:30. So those games will be running concurrently on ESPN and ESPN2. Quad box situation incoming. Big East semis starting half an hour earlier. We got number 1 St. John's against number 5 Marquette on Fox at 6:30 Eastern, followed by Creighton and UConn, the 2 and 3 seeds, half an hour later. Big Ten is in the quarterfinals. It's all chalk there. I'm not going to read through all 4 of those games. SEC quarterfinals, almost all chalk other than Texas upsetting Texas A&M. Andy, we can look at those. And then while we said Power 5, we've also got some really important games late tonight in the Mountain West Conference. Number 1, New Mexico against the very bubbly Boise State at 9:30 Eastern. And then the very bubbly Colorado State, the 2 seed, against number 3 Utah State around midnight Eastern. Both of those on CBS Sports Network. Andy, I just can't wrap my brain around today. It's going to be crazy. What matters most?
Unbelievable slate of basketball games. And the fact that there's been so much chaos and so many injuries and so much carnage, and yet we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Big 12. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 5 in the Big East. And with no disrespect to Xavier, it's 1, 2, 3, 5, but it's St. John's, Creighton, UConn, and Marquette. Like that. Yeah. That kind of feels like chalk, as close to chalk as you were going to get there. ACC 1, 2, 3, 5 with North Carolina being the team over Wake Forest. Again, that feels pretty darn chalky too. Big Ten full chalk 1 through 8. Nobody outside. We talked about so much about the Big Ten, like 5 through 10, 5 through 12, whatever. All feel like they're kind of the same. And yet here we are in the Big Ten quarterfinals. The top 8 seeds all advance. Just craziness. And then the SEC. Again, another conference where it's like this conference is going to try to get 14 teams into the NCAA tournament, or 13, something like that. And yet here we are. Obviously, the double bye helps. We got 1, 2, 3.
I was going to say, the top 4 seeds in the Big Ten and SEC. This is their first,
because they have not played yet. But the only other team that didn't make it was Texas A&M getting upset by Texas. You got Ole Miss over Arkansas. You had Mizzou, the 7 seed, Kentucky, the 6 seed, all advancing. So you're looking, and then even in the Mountain West, 1, 2, 3, 5, and it was Boise State over San Diego State. So the amount of chalk that we're seeing in these conference tournaments is kind of wild, especially with again, Louisville only gets there because a ball bounced into Chucky Hepburn's hands. Creighton only gets there because DePaul blew a 17-point lead. It wasn't easy for some of these teams to get here, but yet here we are sitting here with what looks to be I think if you were just looking at this slate of games and looking at the seeding, you'd think, well, that's kind of boring. It wasn't. Trust me. If you didn't watch any of the games, it was not boring at all how we got here with these matchups. But at the end of the day, we're going to see the best of the best. And that's what people tend to want. And I think that's I know you mentioned the NCAA tournament angle of it all. You love to see upsets early, and then you kind of want to see chalk late. And that's what typically happens in the NCAA tournament. And that's kind of what happened here. We saw some upsets. We saw some fun ones, Oklahoma taking down Georgia, whatever. And then now we're getting into the meat of these conference tournaments, and we're seeing the best of the best take each other on. It's going to be a fantastic day.
Andy, while you were talking, my brain was going somewhere else, back to the bid thieves. I'm just looking at VCU's resume again and wondering if they don't win the A10. Are they a viable?
Just sitting around on a Friday morning looking at VCU's resume. I love it, man. I love it.
This is what we do. Welcome to our lives, people. Are they a viable at-large candidate? They are 32nd in the net. Their predictive average of the predictive metrics is 48.7. That one's not or excuse me, no, that's their resume average. Their predictive metrics, they average 31. They do have a quad 4 loss, but no quad 3s. They're 6-5 in quad 2. So I guess that along with the American is it's a potential to keep your eye on.
Yeah, looking at wins over bubble for VCU, they're pretty good in that category. They're 50th plus 0.27, so not great, but not too bad. But yeah, I think VCU's probably not in that conversation, but they're close. They're close to being in that mix. But yeah, I think ultimately the bid thievery situation is again favorable if you're a team like Texas or North Carolina or San Diego State. Not so favorable if you're somebody who likes to see a little bit of extra chaos in these couple. Again, the American Athletic Conference could absolutely deliver for us. We got in just the slate today for that conference is fantastic. Wichita State, Memphis. Obviously, Memphis is the team that has to go down in order for there to be a bid thief. But I'm keeping an eye on FAU. I'm keeping an eye on North Texas. 23-7 on the season. They don't have a resume that'll put them in the tournament without winning the AAC. But if they do win that conference, they're going to get like an 11 seed, and they're going to be a dangerous one. So there's definitely some fun to watch in that conference if you are hoping to find a bid thief.
All right, guys, no tickets punched today. Just like yesterday, we had a 2-day break after we had 3 punched on Wednesday. But you know what that means? Tomorrow, 12 conference championships coming up on Saturday, and then the final 5 on Sunday. So we're going to punch the final 17 tickets across the next 2 days, tomorrow and Sunday. Going to be crazy, crazy stuff, folks. Stay buckled up, stay locked in, stay hydrated, get up and move around every hour when your Apple Watch says, hey, you need to stand up to get your stand hour, because you ain't trying to get like bed rash or anything just from sitting here. That's
not
one of the
casualties, weekend, at least.
Yes, that's right. That's one of the casualties of these couple weeks. So do your body a favor, get a standing desk, whatever it is. Maybe just walk a lap around your couch while you eat some Doritos, and it'll be all good. All right, guys, we're so grateful for you tuning in with us here on a Friday around the lunch hour to get ready for crazy action again today. If you've not subscribed to Locked On College Basketball already on YouTube and audio, make sure you do that so you don't miss a second of all the great action. And I guess it's out there now, Andy, so we can talk about it. Andy and I are headed to Dallas on Sunday and Monday to record some studio shows for Amazon, along with a great panel of other folks, including Butler great Gordon going to be part of that action. So we're very excited about that. Make sure you check it all out on Amazon Fire TV channels. But we will still be recording our shows for you as well. Don't worry about that. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to see you in there. The link is in the show notes for that. It's absolutely free to join. Why wouldn't you come be a college basketball junkie with all of us? All right, Andy, lots of these teams in action today. Apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes, and shouts to Otega Owe again. Cheers to McBruin. And until we talk again next time, peace.